continue with our reaction to the second quarter GDP figures, joined now by Business Unity South Africa's Deputy President Martin Kingston. Martin, good afternoon to you. The figures are bad. We knew they would be. It also shows just how deep the trouble is that our economy is in.
Well, Stephen, we're not surprised. I think this was at the bad end of our expectations, but obviously it demonstrates just how fundamentally we're going to have to implement structural reform on an urgent and expedited basis if we're going to be able to pivot the trajectory, even in the balance of this year, let alone for 2021 and beyond. And we're very concerned about the impact this is obviously going to have not only on our fiscal deficit, our GDP, debt to GDP ratio, but obviously also on growing levels of unemployment and the risk that that poses even to society in terms of a stable society and a growing economy supporting sustainable employment.
I mean, over the course of this afternoon, here on Newsfeed, you've spoken to professors of economics, you've spoken to economists, you've spoken to unionists. The same question to all of them: where is the talk of reform? We had the Finance Minister, Tito Mbowene's hallelujah moment, as he called it earlier in the year. But the talk of reform, frankly, from what I can see, and I'm just a journalist, you're actually in the discussions, the talk of reform seems to have disappeared.
I don't think that's correct. It may not be in the public domain. We have been absolutely clear as business that, as I said, fundamental structural reform needs to be implemented as a matter of urgency. We're engaged in almost daily conversations now at NEDLAC in the context of the potential economic recovery plan for the country, what we tabled in front of the President and the economic cluster of the ministers, in fact, some 2 months ago. Now the NEDLAC partners, including government, have tabled their propositions. There's a high level of alignment. At the centre of every single one of these propositions is structural reform, whether it be to the SOEs, whether it be to the productivity levels, to the ease of doing business in South Africa. And we've identified collectively, not just individually as business, a number of short-term measures that need to be taken if we're going to restore confidence, and to build that over the medium term, longer-term measures where we need to put credible, properly resourced plans on the table immediately. And that all has to happen, by the way, I think, in the same time frame as the new medium-term budget policy statement, which is going to be tabled by the Minister of Finance in the second half of next month. Time is absolutely running out, and these figures just magnify the need for us to take urgent and committed and aligned action.
Are you growing confident, then, that there will be some kind of reform?
I am pretty clear that all of the social partners accept and acknowledge the need for it, whether or not they're prepared to take the drastic and dramatic steps at the same time as curtailing very significant swathes of expenditure remains to be seen. The Minister of Finance has been absolutely categoric, and we agree with him, that we need to live within our means. Our means are increasingly constrained and curtailed. We're going to have to make very difficult choices. We're going to have to focus on absolutely critical items of expenditure, and we're going to have to leave the balance for the moment. We cannot borrow our way out of it, and we cannot print money to resolve the problem. Both the Ministry of Finance and the Governor of the Reserve Bank have made their positions on that clear. We support them unreservedly.
There's been talk of a stimulus, and there was, of course, the R500 billion that we were told would be a stimulus. It hasn't quite worked out like that. Do we need another stimulus? Does it need to be bigger?
Well, I don't think the R500 billion actually was a stimulus package. I think it was an emergency rescue package, a COVID rescue package. Of that, some 200 billion, you'll remember, Stephen, of the 500 billion was to support small and medium-sized enterprises. There's been much debate about whether or not it's been properly used. The banks are working as effectively as they can within very constrained risk appetite limits to make sure that money is taken advantage of. Some of it was a reallocation of expenditure, and indeed some of it was deferral of tax. That is not a fiscal stimulus. We don't have the luxury of being able to plough R1 trillion, as people have suggested, into the economy right now. Certainly the private sector, if we have the right environment, will commit itself fully and absolutely to investing for the short, the medium and the long term. But to do that, we need to have the appropriate enabling environment. That's exactly at the heart of structural reform. I think we're speaking the same language as government, and I have to say organised labour and civil society. But those decisions are going to have to be taken, communicated quickly, and most importantly, Stephen, they're going to have to be effectively and appropriately implemented. We've said as business we're prepared to lend resource, not financial, but actually skilled and experienced human resource to ensure that those decisions can be implemented by all stakeholders.
All right, so we need action. We need it quickly. There's conversations going on. You've sort of given us a time frame, the medium-term budget policy statement. Martin, I've asked all guests this question because I think it's so important. What happens if we do nothing? We get poorer, we get angrier, we get more frustrated. We maybe can't feed our children at night?
Well, there are two risks that we need to highlight. The most important, in our opinion, is that the fabric of society is actually taking enormous strain. When we can't feed our children, when we can't educate our children, that is, of course, the beginning of that problem. When people cannot be employed, we're going to be anticipating potentially 50% broad unemployment by the time we get into next year, and the possibility of a resurgence of the pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of second and subsequent surges. I don't think that as a country we can afford to have social instability. The second, of course, is a debt trap. We are already courting unsustainably high levels of debt relative to our GDP. It's the biggest single strain on the revenue that we're able to garner as a country. We need to reduce our levels of debt, not increase them. So those two areas are the biggest risk areas, and they're going to become very real and very proximate if we don't take those decisions and, as I said, implement them shortly thereafter in the near term.